Hello, what is intellectual property and why do you need to know about it? Let me start by asking you a question. Why are you in business, or if you haven't started a business yet, why are you thinking of doing so? What's your ambition? Do you want to make it big? Do you aim to be the next Anita Roddick or Richard Branson? Or on the other hand, are you just really looking to set up self-employment so that it can fit around your lifestyle? Certainly, when I founded Azrites 13 years ago, a law firm, that's all I wanted, to fit work around looking after my two daughters. However, soon after starting the business, I realized that I absolutely love entrepreneurship. And as I learnt more and more about business, then my ambitions grew, and now I want to leave something enduring. So at that time, all I'd experienced in terms of IP was the needs of big blue chip companies like Reuters and Evershed's clients. When I began to receive inquiries through Azrites, I was absolutely appalled by some of the drastic mistakes small businesses were making and the catastrophic consequences this was having on their lives. People with ambition who'd put their life savings into their businesses, instead of taking off and being successful, were embroiled in disputes or having their domain names confiscated. Some even actually went under, all because of quite avoidable IP issues. So it became one of my life purposes to raise awareness of IP, because I thought this shouldn't be happening. Creatives, entrepreneurs, they need to know this stuff. This information is vital for them to have. So I wrote blogs, and then I wrote a book, Legally Branded. The inquiries, though, still kept coming in, so people were still making mistakes, and I realized I had to make my messages even more clear to people. I thought perhaps Legally Branded was too long. Maybe people needed a very succinct type of information. So I wrote Intellectual Property Revolution. And after a few years of that, I've realized that actually there's all sorts of ways that I could communicate the information more clearly. Stuff that I didn't realize people didn't know, I now know they don't know, and therefore I need to tell them about that. So I realized there was a need for my Legally Branded online academy course, and I've set that up. So essentially, people the world over need access to IP information as a business skill that they need to develop, because it's not actually law. What you need to do wherever you're located in the world will be the same in order to protect your position way before you go and see a lawyer. I'll explain more about this in a minute, but essentially it's information that is relevant wherever you're located. The sort of actions you need to take, the sort of issues you should home in on are the same wherever you are. IP is the nuts and bolts of your business. Whether you're aiming to make it really big or you just want a lifestyle little business, you do need to pay attention to IP, simply because you don't want the distraction of having to rebrand or finding that the name you've got enables competitors to take advantage of your advertising and market spend. So there's a lot of information people need to know in order to set up properly. You see, IP is really important because it's a property right. Just as when you own land or a house, you have a property right. So when you've got a business, the intellectual property rights within that business are assets that have value, and therefore you need to take the right actions in relation to them so that you can create a business that's more valuable and at the very least that avoids problems. So what is IP? Unfortunately, while land law is a single set of laws that protect land, that govern property rights in physical property, intellectual property rights, which cover intangibles, are a series of different rights which are huge bodies of law within their own right. You know, there's patents, trademarks, copyright, designs, confidentiality. Each of these is a vast area of law, and you need to be aware of how they impact you in terms of the actions you're going to take when you first set up or start a new project. Because, you know, at that point, you can't keep going to a lawyer. I used to say you need to go to a lawyer really early on. And then I realized how impractical that is, because for a start, lawyers cost money. But even if you had the money, who's got the time to keep turning to a lawyer every time you've got an idea, every time you want to come up with a new name? No, there are certain things that you as the creative or the entrepreneur need to be able to do for yourself. And that's why upskilling yourself in IP is really the only way forward. So let me talk a bit more about what these rights are. Patents protect the way things work, how they function. So if you have an idea for an invention, if you've got a new way of doing something that is a step forward, and has novelty, isn't the same old way of dealing with a particular technology, then it may be that you could patent it. So patents protect the way things work, the way they function. And when it's just an idea in your mind, then you must keep that secret until you've decided whether or not it's open to you to apply for a patent to protect it. You get no brownie points, no rights whatsoever in a mere idea. So just because you thought of something first doesn't matter. If you filed a patent application and have rights there, then yes, you can stop other people copying your idea. But without that, you have nothing. So you need to keep it secret until you've decided what you're going to do about it. For example, a patent is Dyson's vacuum cleaners, which dispensed with the vacuum bags. His way of dispensing with the bag is what's protected by a patent. Now, the Dyson vacuum cleaners are also beautifully designed because he was a designer. So that design is protected by design rights, which protect the surface decoration or shape, visual appearance of products. So it could be wallpaper, the way it's designed, a handbag. These are all protected through design rights. Now, patents and designs are highly relevant, obviously, to certain industries, but in terms of businesses, all the businesses out there, they're not the most relevant. So you need to be aware of them, but probably you don't need to go there and learn all about them until you have an issue. So you need to know enough to know that you need more information. But otherwise, you can just focus on what I call the core 3 rights, which every business the world over needs to focus on when they're setting up their business and throughout the business. Every time you create something new, set up a new product, these three rights come into their own. And that's confidentiality, trademarks, and copyright. As I explained, confidentiality protects something that's secret. There's also trade secrets, know-how, your database. There's all sorts of different ways in which confidentiality law comes into play. In future podcasts, I'll be covering that, but that's all I'm going to say about it now. Beyond the fact that if you do want to discuss your ideas with someone, then do it carefully, but use a confidentiality agreement, and the right agreement is very important. Then there's trademarks, which protect your names, your logo, your distinctive branding effectively. Trademarks are hugely important, and it's actually something that I see people taking on board right, left and centre. Unfortunately, they're often doing it the wrong way. They're not focusing on whether the names are okay, whether they can use a name, but people are registering rights, often in the wrong classes. So if you're going to focus on trademarks, do it properly, learn about it. Don't just think you've covered it off by going and registering something. So I'll talk about trademarks a bit more in a minute. And then there's copyright, which is vastly important because virtually every asset that a business generates is going to be protected by copyright. You know, there's your website, music, images, your content, any software you have, all sorts of things are protected by copyright. And one issue that's come up with copyright is that it was the first right that led nations throughout the world to get together in order to have an international approach to intellectual property protection. What was happening was, authors like Charles Dickens, who were hugely popular, were creating these books which publishers over in the States would just rip off and print over there, make a ton of money, and the author would get nothing from it. So as a result, the Berne Convention came into being, and as it means that if you have copyright in a country that doesn't need registration, you're still going to be protected in other countries that are signatories to the Berne Convention, even though you haven't registered your copyright in that country. So it's hugely important for authors and creators because it means that you can control what happens to your creative works, your efforts. You see, this is an important issue to understand about intellectual property rights, is that the state or states, when you look at the world, are constantly doing this balancing act. On the one hand, they want to encourage creativity and reward it by granting rights to people. So that's why you might get a 20-year monopoly if you have a patentable idea that you're willing to share with the world how you do something, what you've realized, how you've come up with that innovation. Otherwise, if you just kept it to yourself, then the world would be no wiser and there wouldn't be progress and innovation. So that's why you can't get a patent over an idea that you've already disclosed, because the bargain with the state is that in return for disclosing this information that's not out there in the public domain, you will get copyright. You will get patent protection. And that gives you a 20-year monopoly, which means that you can get your investment back that you might have put into coming up with that innovation. Then, on the other hand, the state doesn't want to give such strong rights to creators that it then stifles creativity because whatever you do is going to be infringing on somebody's rights. So this balancing act is something to remember all the time. That's why if you come up with this very generic name for your business, the state is not going to give you a monopoly over it, because the idea behind trademarks is that terms that other traders need to use should be kept free. So, for example, if I set up my business and I think, okay, I'm going to call myself IP lawyer. There's nobody else out there whose business is called IP lawyer. Let me be that business. Now, do you think I can stop other businesses who come along and also call themselves IP lawyer? No, of course not. And that goes without saying. But people make this mistake all the time because they assume that a descriptive name is the way to go when they're naming their business. You need a name, not a description, when you are naming a business. And of course, the state isn't going to protect you if you've come up with a descriptive name and then Mr. Me Too also comes along and produces the same sort of business with the same name. This actually has been something I've seen in reality, what it can do to people. One client comes to mind who had a brilliant idea. It was really innovative, and he set it up, and unfortunately he had given it a totally descriptive name. So he took off and he was getting a lot of business, life was good, and then he began to notice a competitor on the scene who was using the same name but with a different domain ending. And he came along to me to find out what he could do, because it was having a dramatic impact on his revenues. And unfortunately, there is nothing you can do. Yes, I mean, there is, in theory, a passing off action, but it would be throwing money down the drain to try and bring a passing off action when somebody is using what is essentially a totally descriptive name. So naming is very important to suspend your beliefs about what makes for a good name and be willing to go and learn about names so that when you're choosing them, you can really choose well for your business, your products, your services, whatever it is that you are naming. So when you have a business, the main value when you come to sell it will be contained within its trademarks, within its name. So, for example, in 2017, the world's top brand was Apple, with a value of 170 billion. This was followed by Google, valued at 100 billion, and then Microsoft at 87 billion pounds. 3 words: Apple, Google, Microsoft. You know, this is where the value lies. It's in the brand. And don't assume that just because you're a small business, you're not a brand, because you are. Everyone has a brand. You don't have to be a household name in order to have a brand. So the value that you generate as you succeed, as you attract more custom, will all be contained within your brand name. So make sure that that's a good one and choose really well. I do very well out of people making naming and other IP mistakes. You know, usually they have to spend money to resolve it one way or the other. But I don't actually get so lit up by doing that sort of work as I do by helping people to understand how to name their businesses properly, how to structure their IP so that they can go on to win, you know. That prevention is so important in IP. In most areas of life, it's kind of looked down on prevention. But actually in IP, it's part and parcel of creating a business is you need to think about competition and protection of your business. The other issue that I want to draw to your attention is that therefore protection has two different meanings. There's the protection involved when you're actually creating something like a name or commissioning someone to build your website or a piece of software. That usually happens way before you see a lawyer, and that's where the majority of mistakes take place. And my online branding course is aimed at helping businesses to actually understand what they need to do. They're not difficult, the steps you need to take, but you do need to take the right steps and have processes in your business to make sure that these are never overlooked. That's how you set up a business on strong foundations that's ready for growth. Don't rely on myths and misinformation for your IP protection. Don't go on social media, ask friends and family, and then take action, because with that, you're setting yourself up for making mistakes, and mistakes take time and money, which is so unnecessary. Learn this stuff because it matters. It matters so much to your future success, whatever you're doing, whether you're starting a business because you just want a little business and self-employment, or you have big aims. What you don't want is to be derailed by very avoidable problems that you could deal with if only you knew about it before it happened to you. So that's my advice, is learn about IP, learn what actions you need to take. The problem with IP at the moment is that being an intangible, it's very easily overlooked. There's an element of the Wild West about it as well, because people just lay claims to names, even though they know that somebody else has better rights to that name. They don't really seem to care that much or get it. Probably, I suspect, it's because they don't know all the problems they're shoring up for themselves for the future in this. But this Wild West mentality used to also apply for land. Perhaps if we go to Mars, there's going to be another land grab situation where people will just lay claims. At the moment, this is what's happening with IP. But I foresee that this is going to change as people become more and more aware of IP. Then they're going to learn to respect other people's rights, and also they're going to understand what they need to do in order to avoid problems for their own businesses. So, as names are one of the most important aspects of intellectual property rights, I'm going to record an audio book called How to Name, How to Trademark a Name. And that's going to be the next 14 audios are going to be 14 chapters from that book. You can just download them all and then listen to them at your leisure. I will, in future podcasts, refer back to some of these chapters and elaborate on the concepts. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.